UNSW, Strategic Health Policy Consultant. Bill, thank you for your time and your social distancing at home. We do appreciate it.
That's correct.
Can I ask?
The Prime Minister should be.
Yeah. So you didn't think that 1.5 metres away?
The Prime Minister announced today that he had not had a test. He had going to his doctor. He and I were exposed to a person with coronavirus at roughly the same time last week. Under the rules he adopted for himself, he is free to hold press conferences and go around Australia. Under the rules imposed by me, by New South Wales Health, I've been placed in 14 days isolation. We were exposed to the same problem at the same time. Now, there are two rules that are running in Australia. It is not good enough for the Prime Minister to blithely say, I will get around to it if I can. What are the rules? There is no orderly understanding, even after that press conference, of the rules in relation to testing. The fact is, there are too few test kits in Australia because of the lamentable lack of foresight and planning. There are no, you cannot get the information today from the government about how many test kits there are in Australia tonight and the rules under which they will be distributed. It is beyond time that some order was imposed in what has been a very poor response about testing. This is not good enough. There are places in suburban Brisbane where doctors have been told not to send people for tests. If you do not test, you do not find out the facts and figures. Now, 97,000 kits coming to Australia, that is 9 days at the rate that we should be doing it, which is about 10 or 11,000 a day. I accept that thanks to the lack of planning and foresight, we are in a position where we have to ration tests. We have had indications in the last several days of the well-connected, senators and so on, rushing off to be tested. Now, that is not in accordance with the guidelines laid down by most of the health ministers, health officers in the states, but apparently not federally. It is beyond time that this was sorted out. And I cannot abide press conferences from courtyards by prime ministers who cannot answer the simple question: how many tests are there in Australia today? What are the clear rules under which they will be allocated? And there must not be one rule for those who are well connected and can go around the system and one rule for the others. That's very clear. That is the order that we need from the authorities who are in charge of the response to this epidemic.
Can I just clarify, who's the person that both you and the Prime Minister were exposed to last Wednesday? It's not Peter Dutton, is it?
Well, the Prime Minister was exposed to Peter Dutton. He was at the Cabinet meeting. He was at the Barangaroo on that night, right? Mr Dutton, by his own admission, was infectious at that time. No. The next morning, a couple of hours later, I was exposed to a person who was asymptomatic at the time, had been at the Tom Hanks gathering at the Opera House on the Sunday night. Now, roughly the timelines within hours are very similar. And I don't want to draw comparisons, the Prime Minister in one sense, but I was exposed roughly at the same time to a person in the same situation as Mr Dutton. In the middle of last week, the Chief Medical Officer of Australia came out and said there was no need for the Prime Minister to self-isolate. Now, that is not consistent with the advice given to me and being distributed in New South Wales. I am not able to be tested under the guidelines because I'm asymptomatic. I was exposed, but I'm in 14 days. The Prime Minister was not. The Prime Minister said today, if my doctor says to get a test, I will get a test. But if he hasn't got any symptoms, he shouldn't. But he should be addressing Australia under the rules applied to me and to people in New South Wales from a room in the lodge. He is not. Why not?
You can see there that there is a bit of social distancing there, a big space in between the two podiums. We're journalists at press conferences. Press galleries working collaboratively to have one camera at these events.
This is just beside the point. There needs to be order brought to chaos. if the Prime Minister and the people who are in the National Cabinet would care to go down to the supermarkets in Melbourne at 5 in the morning and see the queues, it might occur to them that there is a need for rationing, that there is a way in which we have to bring order to what is happening in the supermarkets. It is no use to go on television and say it is un-Australian to hoard. Where has everybody been? Now, you can hear my anger and frustration. All of these things should have been done weeks ago. The advice today is the advice of last week. It is really silly. Who is going to enforce a 100-person ban? The cops? Who? I mean, the point is, schools, if schools are not gathering of more than 100 people, what are? I mean, the lack of thought and common sense in this is really reaching concerning proportions. We have a national cabinet. Good. That's a great idea. I think it's an excellent. But we don't have on that the leader of the opposition. We don't have on that a representative or more of local governments in Australia who, I can tell you, are facing these problems hourly, with people in social isolation, scared, uncertain of what to do, no access to tests, no clarity, no structure, no understanding at the level where the people are. Now, the people of Australia...
Can I just ask you one question just what you said? Sorry, just what you said about the testing. Do you accept the premise, though, that there are always going to be a limited number of tests that you can have?
No, I don't.
And so some people...
No. There are a limited number of tests in Australia because... There are a limited number of tests in Australia because the people who took control of this planning in January chose to believe in a theory that you did not have to prepare the Australian people. This was not the approach taken in Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore and Hong Kong. They took the necessary steps and thought we must plan for the worst, hope that it doesn't come, right? Hope that we're overreacting then, but we will stockpile and think. We will mobilise the people. We will tell them the truth. We will make everything transparent. That was not done. The result of not doing that, and that was certainly not done in the United Kingdom, who were the people who gave the lead. We used to lead in this area. Now we follow. So we followed the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister turned on a dime yesterday and understood the drastic consequences of the path they had been going down. We have been going down that path. Now we have to correct it. I accept that we don't have test kits here, but where are they? How are they going to be distributed? There cannot be two rules for that. I'm sorry to be... I understand how this comes across. I'm being direct, but I'm deeply frustrated. This is not an act of God. It is not inevitable. All of this stuff ought to have been last week. Now get together a proper national cabinet, ring up the leader of the opposition. He's got to be in the next one. Ring up the head of the local government association who can speak and say to them what is going on at that very important level of government. Replicate those decision-making processes at the state and territorial level. That's what we need to do. And we need to think about rationing and control in the supermarkets and an increased police presence in the supermarkets and hospitals in a caring and sharing sort of way, you know, not...
Bill Boucher, we will have to leave it there. The government does say they've been following the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, but I do appreciate your insight.
Yes, they have. That's the problem.
The Strategic Health Policy Consultant. He is the one in charge. But Bill Boucher, thank you for your time.
No, he's not in charge.